let's start with London. We've talked elsewhere in the course to Tony Gomez-Banez about congestion pricing and the idea, which probably actually began here in New York with Bill Vickery in the 1950s, actually. And it was, of course, as we know, embraced by Singapore in the 1970s. But it was London, in some sense, that captured the imagination of the world when it finally did it. How did that come about?
It's actually a pretty interesting story. So you have to connect it to the election of the first directly elected mayor of London. This was Ken Livingstone, the year 2000. So work had been going forward as a precursor to congestion pricing with various white papers and other things taking place. But in the Parliamentary Act that was enacted to create the election of the mayor, they put into the Parliamentary Act the ability for the mayor, the legal authority for the mayor, to make the decision about congestion pricing.
And who in Parliament wanted that? I mean, it's so unimaginable from an American perspective that the larger legislature would cook that.
At that point in time, and now we're going back into the very late 1990s, transportation was the #1 issue in London. When the mayor of London was elected in 2000, transportation was the #1 issue. Not housing, not education, not healthcare. It was transportation was the #1 issue. There was a building sense of frustration about what was happening, and a sense of, to some extent, coming out of the things that they had worked on through the 90s, the privatization of the railway system and the privatization of the bus system. I think there was a sense that there was a different way to be able to deal with the roadways. Having said that, they loved the fact that somebody else was going to take that decision. And that person turned out to be Ken. Right. And his argument was that most of the people in London were using the tube, they were using the buses, and that he saw two things. One, he saw the ability to be able to make the bus system work better.
In two ways, right? Both by getting money for it and by reducing the competition.
That's exactly right. So he was, but it was the investment that was being made in bus lanes and more buses. He saw this as all part of a picture of saying, how do we actually improve the bus service that was taking place in London, and using the road capacity in a way that he was reallocating it really to buses and to livable space. And then I think the second part was the idea that this was creating a new revenue stream, and that revenue stream was then being redirected back into the public transit system as well. And I think it was right on both counts, really, in the way that the bus system in London improved dramatically. The utilization of the bus system went up 20–25%, enormous numbers. I mean, particularly when you think about a city like New York, in contrast, where the use of the bus system has been falling for decades. In London, it actually has grown. No, again, I think Ken saw that. I mean, I think he was in his heart and soul, he's a Londoner. He's a guy who actually does take the bus, he does take the train, he knew what it was, and he saw that this really mattered for people. And so it wasn't, is this a conservative policy or a liberal policy? It was a mechanism to get the things done that he wanted to see get done.
Right. I mean, if anything, it was a beautiful combination of equity and efficiency in one, right? Yeah. That it was efficiently using public space and helping the poor Londoners who take buses rather than drive. What were the key lessons about implementation, you think, that you draw from this?
Well, you just didn't know what was going to happen. So you had, basically, for each thing that you were going to do, you defined a process that was belt and suspenders. And the argument really was, I would rather spend too much money at the beginning and overinvest to be able to have a high quality service than be in a situation in which people are going to complain from that point in time. So you overinvested in call centers, for example. You overinvested in an network distribution network to be able to do it. But you were able actually to answer every one of the questions. When someone said, what about this? You had an answer that was in hand to be able to do it. And then you were able to come back and change and ramp down. You began to realize where things worked better or where things worked worse in doing it. And you made choices that went alongside of that. And again, and nobody had this view that it was perfect. But the sense that disaster was going to happen, that everything would stop, that London would come to a halt, none of those things actually happened. And then from that, you were able to actually make change and evolve and do things that work out differently.